We're excited to have a great lineup of speakers from USAID and especially also some young leaders from around the globe. So welcome everybody. Before we jump into the main topic, let me just do a few introductory comments about YouthPower Learning and positive youth development. So YouthPower Learning is a 5-year USAID-funded project that focuses on learning and knowledge sharing across all of USAID's youth programming, but also more broadly about positive youth development. So what is positive youth development? We have 4 particular elements that define positive youth development. One is that youth should have assets, so that includes, for example, the skills, to also have the ability to leverage those assets, so agency, the ability to contribute to positive change for themselves and their communities, and be surrounded by an enabling environment. And it is that enabling environment in particular that we are going to talk about today with the safe spaces or safe public spaces. So what does YouthPower Learning do? We are sharing resources, events, information on the Learning Hub, youthpower.org. We've identified what works in lots of different spaces, and actually we have also some examples of useful resources and tools connected to safe spaces, and we'll have the link at the end of our presentation. We have also identified indicators to measure positive youth development, and we are publishing a learning agenda that you will all be able to leverage shortly. And feel free to join any of our communities of practice: Youth in Peace and Security, Gender and Positive Youth Development, Youth Engagement, and Cross-Sectoral Skills for Youth. So with this short introduction, let me hand it over to Jen Haig, who is one of our co-champions under YouthPower Learning. And with that, Jen, welcome. Jen, I think you may be on mute. Can you speak? I don't see Jen, so let me just start by moving forward, and Jen can jump in a few minutes. So let me start with and introduce our first speaker, Mike McCabe, who is the Agency Youth Coordinator at USAID. And we're delighted to have him start the presentation about safe public spaces.
Thanks so much, Maria, and thanks for everyone for joining us today for this special webinar on International Youth Day. And as all of you know, this year's International Youth Day is focused on safe public spaces and young people's role in delivering those to other young people and people in their community. And so we're really excited to have the various young speakers and allies on to share some of those experiences around the world. It's not only an important day, yesterday was actually International Youth Day, but the whole month of August, USAID is focused on highlighting our year-round efforts to engage young people as partners in development and go beyond rhetoric to really focus on how we're better listening to young leaders and supporting youth-led local solutions. And in the coming month, you'll be hearing more about, for example, our new Youth Lead platform, which is for and by young change makers around the world, as well as potential new resources for supporting youth-led innovation. So keep an eye to those announcements. I was at the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI, Washington Mandela Fellows Summit last week, or 2 weeks ago now. And, you know, there's nothing more inspiring than to talk with 750 young leaders from across the continent about their vision and their efforts and the number things they're doing, but also some of the challenges. And as I was talking to some of them about how they're addressing peace, security, and CVE, or a new generation of public leadership focused on transparent governance, or new ideas for business and tech leadership. A number of them discussed how they had overcome in their journey from kind of humble beginnings to their current leadership, how they struggled with marginalization or discrimination or violence, and often the lack of safe public spaces and opportunities, whether it be in the home with gender-based violence, or in the school with bullying or worse, and in the community situations where there was conflict or crisis. And it forced me to think back to when I was working with USAID as chief of party of a citizen security and violence prevention program in Central America, and the power that the Youth Outreach Center model had across the region there. I was working in Panama, and we were setting up 23 youth outreach centers in the most gang-impacted communities. And I remember young people like Rafael, who had a very rough beginning in terms of growing up in a single-parent household with substance abuse, and unfortunately having to drop out of school, and then got involved in the gang. And it was only once he came across a man named Pastor Manuel, who was running a youth outreach center, that he saw that there was a second chance opportunity for him to find a safe space in that community where he could kind of break away from some of the gang influences and get a new beginning of opportunities for education and job training and life skills training, and being part of the Youth Against Violence movement. And over time, he was able to not only benefit from that, but also become a volunteer leader with that program. And he often attributed to that new arrival of a safe space in his life and making all the difference. So I want to just share kind of 3 different ways, because as Maria said, safe spaces take a lot of different forms, and they're both a key feature of what we call our positive youth development approach, where we highlight these kind of 7 key features that are evidence-based, but they're also a great microcosm of what the enabling environment for all effective programming to take place are. So in Guatemala, we recently have been supporting the Youth Safe Encounters spaces, which are basically a model in the Western Highlands where we're able to have youth encounter spaces for young people to get training of all sorts of types on entrepreneurship and employment and health issues. And Amadeo Chuan is a young person in his 20s who went through this program after, similar to Rafael, going through a lot of challenges and actually trying to migrate a number of times towards the U.S. And only upon his kind of return to that region in the Highlands that he came across the youth encounter spaces, went through the training, especially on entrepreneurship development, where he could be away from some of the negative influences, and as a result, opened up his own safe space called Cafe Berlin, which is basically now providing opportunities for hundreds of young people each week to find ways that they can express their needs and their ideas and opportunities and generate income. Similarly, in Ethiopia, through our project called Potential with Save the Children, Belende Blaze, who's about 25, came across our Youth Economic Strengthening Centers. And these are 28 kind of youth centers that were set up as safe spaces out of a total of about 2,000 that the Ethiopian government has. But USAID has partnered with the government and with community organizations to really create model spaces for economic opportunity there, and training of young people who often are left out of the system or marginalized. So Belene was able to get that training and technical skills and entrepreneurship, and as a result was able to create his own small business that's now helping employ 40 other young people. And they've been able to, through this network of the youth employment centers, really generate a lot more opportunities for hundreds and thousands of other young people across there. And finally, I'll just share the model of a different type of safe space, which is in Niger, where we've been working in the Zinder province, where about 6 out of 10 young girls are married before the age of 15. And I want to reemphasize that. About 6 out of 10 girls are married before they turn 15. And so through our Swaki project and program, which is focused on kind of food aid, but also targets young girls between 10 and 18 to create a safe space for food security, to decrease child marriage and early pregnancy and combat maternal child mortality. And so they have weekly meetings with adolescent girls in the Safe Space program and link them to a whole array of other services for being a protected place for young women in particular, and give them that sense of empowerment to build a better life for themselves. So those are just a couple of the examples of different ways, and we're going to hear a lot more from some of the other young leaders here. But one thing I would just close with is we've also learned a lot by supporting different types of safe spaces, and particularly youth development resource centers like in the West Bank and Gaza. And 4 things that I always take away as kind of key things we have to think about. One, we have to think about where safe spaces are located to make sure we do no harm when we're engaging young people in spaces, whether it's to get young people into a protected space or just a place where they could talk about issues, civic or other. So really making sure that we engage youth to figure out where's the best place to access it and put a safe space for transport, lighting, etc. The second thing is the centers have to be conceived with programming that's really responsive to the expressed interests and needs of young people, rather than a cookie-cutter approach that perhaps a large ministry or donor is thinking about. So that part of engaging youth in what makes sense for their needs and their interests. The third thing is finding that balance between ensuring that it's both cost sustainable for the long run, but also provides quality programming, because sometimes we find safe spaces that are just basically a drop-in center, and other ones have a much better structured set of programming that responds to the needs. Fourth, local ownership and management of these entities is key. If the community doesn't feel they own that safe space, they're often not managed well and sustained well. And in the places like in El Salvador, where the community really has owned the youth outreach centers, what we find is that they're protected by the entire community and they're sustained by that community. So those are just a couple of the key things that we've learned along the way. And you know, that they need to have a diversified resource mobilization plan. And some of our best safe space programs look both at mobilizing volunteers, mobilizing municipal resources, private sector donors, and then having some community wealth or community enterprise ventures, whether they're a gym or a cafe linked to them, that generate that. When safe spaces have this diversified income, we find that they last much more than the 2 or 3 years of the life of an initial project, and that they really have long-term sustainability and impact. So I'll stop there and would love to turn it back over to Jen and the other speakers.
Thank you, Mike. I'm not yet sure if Jen can reconnect, so this is Maria. Let me just move to our next speaker. Thank you for giving us that kind of overview of how USAID also thinks about safe spaces and how you have incorporated it. And so we're looking forward to hearing from some of our young leaders in terms of how they have either experienced safe spaces or are building safe spaces. So our next speaker is Mustafa Wafa from Mish Madrasa, which in Arabic means not a school. And so I'll let Mustafa talk about his project and his experience. Mustafa, over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Maria. Hello, everyone. Happy International Youth Day. Thank you so much for allowing the opportunity for me to be part of this webinar. It is such a pleasure to speak with you about my project and about my experience with safe places. So firstly, I would like to start with my personal experience with safe spaces. I would start with my experience in Tahrir Square, being part of the revolution, the Egyptian revolution. Back in 2011, going out chanting about freedom and all of this, and I felt for the first time in my life, I was 21 back then, and I felt for the first time in my life this feeling that I'm free and I'm allowed to express my ideas and express myself among my peers in Tahrir Square. After that, 2 years after, the revolution did not achieve what we actually wanted, and then I had to go back to my community, my local community, and it is called Saft 11. Going back with this mindset that turned my my entire life. I do believe that it was a huge turning point in my life. This feeling that I was safe emotionally and I was safe mentally to express my thoughts and express myself. So I went back to my community, Saft 11. It is one of the biggest slum areas in Cairo, Greater Cairo. The population is between like 600 to 900,000 people. It is marginal. We are marginalized against like the. It is so challenging. No one is taking care of the infrastructure and stuff, and many problems are going on. And I wanted to just come back from the square with this idea of we need a safe space. We need to have young people feel the same way so that their lives can be transformed just as mine. And I was back one day finding a group of children with razors, knife, and sticks. And one of them, the leader of them, his name was Salah, and they called them out. They are actually my neighbors. I was like, what's going on? What is the problem? And they were like, they hit us and we will hit them back. They cut my brother's face and we will cut their faces back. And I invited them inside my house. We spoke and we tried to resolve it, and we resolved it. But I was like, wow, the problem is much bigger. It's not just only about this sitting or this one meeting with the children. And that's when I went out to the larger community of Saft 11, where I grew up. And I went out asking young people and the children, what do they need? And I have always been fond of education and believing that education can really transform communities to a better place. So I asked them about schools and about education. What do you want? And I made a survey on 120 person around the neighborhood, and 97% of them said that we do not want schools. And by schools, they mean two kinds of school, and the schools that we have in our neighborhood. The first one is the public schools from the government, and it's actually very crowded and very violent. And the second type of the schools is the religious schools, where we have imams and religious leaders in a church in these schools. And people were seeking an alternative, and they are actually against it. And they said, oh, we do not want these schools, and this is how I started this, not a school. So I told them, okay, if that's what you want, if that's what the need in the community, let's start another school. And then I went out to the community, calling the children and starting something. And here comes the first challenge. The first challenge was dealing with the safe space that I wanted to create, or I tried to create, was that the mindset of the children and the parents and in the very beginning, they have never experienced such a thing. They are used to be beaten, they are used to be shouted at, they used to shout at other people to get their points delivered, and to just have them feel safe and have them feel that they are actually able to express their thoughts and ideas no matter what it is. And that was the first challenge that we faced with the children themselves. But once we have reached to this point where they actually feel safe and they felt we got this trust and we got this sense of ownership from themselves. And that's when you see in the slides right in front of you places these children here, Ahmed, Salah, and Nada, building it. This rooftop and the slide right in front of you, they built it and they made it. They felt this feeling of ownership, And now they have all these capabilities and confidence of facing their problems, facing their outside community. After that, they actually taught me personally a lot. They showed me, they have shown me how when you feel that trusted and when you feel that confident and when you feel safe, how transformative that can be. From holding knives and from holding sticks and going around seeking fights, I have seen them addressing the problems around us in the community. For example, and putting action plans and acting on them. For example, very, very quick, there is a harassment problem in my community. Unfortunately, boys would harass girls, and older guys would harass younger guys. And that's when they went out addressing the harassment campaign against girls. And the girls in Mish Madrasa put this plan and they executed it with their peers, going out and telling people to not do this and having an action towards the problem. The second example I want to give is the drug problems. The drug problem in South 11. We are the biggest supplier for drugs in Greater Cairo, supplying drugs for 30 million people, unfortunately. And now they are being teenagers. They experience their peers going through drugs, and they address this problem and they put an action plan, and they have they are doing it and executing, seeking a solution. What I actually want to say is that a safe place, when we really reach there, we will not only transform our personal lives, but the lives of our community. Because imagine these young leaders now, or these young peers of mine, Salah and Bibo and Meda and Shahid and all of them. Now, we started as 5, and the impact that we are having now, 90 have joined Mish Madrasa more. And the 90 are having the same mindset, because now all of us are working together towards expanding and having South 11, instead of being the biggest, the most problematic slum area in Cairo, to be the change maker, not only in Greater Cairo, but in Egypt and the Middle East. And by this, I'm saying that, and this is the second challenge that I would like to speak about, how important it is, the need for these young leaders to see the outside world. Because this is what I'm challenging now personally with my peers, my young leaders, friends, that I want to make a point that their reach is international. They are capable of not just solving these problems, and they actually can make it the second step to solve the problems we face in Egypt and the Middle East and even internationally. But we have to make this connections with the outside world, with Africa, with Asia, with Europe, with America, with Latin America, and with everyone, so that they can see the potential that they hold. And this is very, very challenging right now. And we have started doing this. Now, Mish Madrasa has, as you can see in the slide, partnerships with American University in Cairo, American University in Washington, D.C., American Embassy in Egypt, and we're trying to start something that's constant, not only with the embassies and the universities, but with companies as well, such as Global Sleep over in Washington, D.C., and a Chance Academy in Washington, D.C. as well. So now we want to break the second challenge. We have successfully broke the first challenge, the challenge of trust and ownership, and now they feel this ownership and they taking actions, and now we want to show them the reach and show them the potential to actually transform everything. Finally, I would like to end my talk with an invitation to you. Whenever you come to Egypt, please to Cairo, please come and visit Mish Madrasa. It would be our pleasure to have you here. And just stay in touch via our Facebook page or via email with me personally. And thank you so much. And it is such a pleasure sharing with you.
Thank you so much, Mustafa. Let me just check if our moderator Jen is back in and connected. Jen, are you able to connect now?
My mic is showing.
Perfect. Yes.
Can you guys hear me?
You're back on.
Fantastic. Hi. Happy International Youth Day, everybody. Thank you, Mustafa. That was great.
Thank you so much.
And so we have for our next speaker, shukran, Mustafa, Amelia Hunt from Tanzania. And I think I might be erasing your slide. Sorry, Amelia. All right, I will stay out of the way, and it's all you.
No worries. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you perfectly. Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Amelia.
Great. So hi, everyone. My name's Amelia Hunt. I spent the last 9 months working with humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. I'm also a volunteer with Tanzania Development Trust. So I'm going to speak to you a bit about the projects they're running in Tanzania at the moment, particularly to help young girls who are at risk of FGM, female genital mutilation. So what Crowd2Map are trying to do is to help young girls who are at risk of female genital mutilation to find a safe space where they're protected from FGM. In rural Tanzania, this is incredibly difficult because there aren't maps. I think a lot of us take for granted that we live in places where we can easily locate ourselves, we can easily find help when we need it, but that's not the case in many areas of Tanzania. So the Tanzania Development Trust was formed 40 years ago. The Crowd2Map project is a more recent project. So Tanzania Development Trust has spent the last 40 years working with local activists who are doing their best to change the futures for young people. So they work very closely with local activists. You can see one of them in the photo there, Robi Samweli. She's a survivor of FGM and a great advocate for female rights and supporting young people and empowering them to change their futures. They do a lot of outreach work, not just with young people, but also with the communities. They also have created a safe house, several safe houses now, where local activists try to rescue girls that local people have reported are at risk, and they try to find them and take them to areas where they can receive education, they can learn local skills, and they're safe from FGM during what is known as the cutting season. At the end of this, the activists try to reintegrate them to their families by going and supporting the girls to go back and speak to their communities and making sure that their parents, their community leaders are aware of the risks that faces these girls. Not always easy, but they create that space where they feel like they can return to their homes if they want to, and if they're not safe, then they've still got the safe house to return to. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, a big problem in rural Tanzania is girls can't find the safe houses to start with. And unfortunately, the safe house staff cannot always find them. Often, girls at risk of FGM, which is actually illegal in Tanzania, girls are targeted at night time. Safe house staff have a really difficult time finding them, especially when you can imagine they're getting a phone call from a remote village where there are several different village names, there are no road maps, and no way of navigating to the girls in time to support them and rescue them. So this, as you can see, that's a very bare-looking map of rural Tanzania. And underneath you can see a map of Dar es Salaam. So fortunately in Dar es Salaam, humanitarian OpenStreetMap team have been doing a lot of work with young people as well on a flood prevention mapping project called Ramani Hiyah. So the state of the maps in most of Tanzania's cities are a lot better, but in rural Tanzania things are still pretty bad. This is all created on OpenStreetMap, which is the only open source map of the world and is available to everyone to edit and add to. I think my slides have disappeared. 1 second. Can anyone else see the slides at the moment? Or is it
We see your slides and we can still hear you.
Okay, I can't see my slides, but I can't put them on my computer, so it's fine. So yeah, the real thing that young girls need in Tanzania are maps. So I think this is the slide I'm on. We are making them. So together with Crowd to Map Tanzania, HOT has been supporting local volunteers and also global volunteers. So over 7,500 global volunteers across the world have been helping to support the project to end FGM and also working with local community members. Oh, my slides are back. So far, Better Maps have helped 3,000 girls to find safe houses and avoid being cut. In Manyara region alone, this has improved the statistics for FGM by coinciding with a death rate of 75%. To give you a bit more of a real number of what that actually means, in 2017, having better access to maps meant that the number went from 3,700 girls at risk of FGM to only 1,076 being affected. And we hope that with better maps, that number will only improve. So what's happening on the ground is we're training local young people and empowering them with technology, not just so that they have access to the physical safe space the safe houses provide them, but also providing them with the safe space to connect to an international community that are supporting them to change their futures. So far, over 600 community members, which is mainly young girls, have been trained in community mapping using nothing more than a smartphone. We really believe that by empowering young people with local tools that they can buy in their own country, providing them with small grants to purchase those devices, and providing them with training in open source technology, we can really empower them with the knowledge to change their futures. So we see mapping as a tool towards greater gender equality, particularly with the young people of today. And we're trying to support them to change the futures for themselves and for others by creating the safe spaces online as well as offline in the safe houses themselves. So please join us. I actually have a quote from Roby, who, as I said, was one of the main activists who helped set up the safe houses, who says, "In my community, women and girls are constantly undermined and threatened when they use technology. Support from the global community has allowed us to train female mappers to map their villages, and our volunteer network has been able to help protect girls from FGM." So I guess in her words, by creating a safe space for girls physically is one thing, but in particular to improve their access to these safe houses by improving the map, giving them access to technology and empowering them to be part of a global network and creating a space where they can talk about their problems is, I guess, an entirely new concept of what we mean by a safe space. So they have the physical space where they have protection from the communities where they're at risk of FGM, but also helping to give them a voice, to put their voice on a map. One of the things I was asked to talk about today as well was the challenges that we face. No, to answer the question, the safe houses are put on the map. The areas where there's kind of like vulnerable communities, any personal information isn't on the map. We just put on village names, community points which are identifiable, so things like churches and schools, so that it's easy to locate girls when we get phone calls from concerned family members. But no identifiable information is put on the map. The safe houses are put on the map, but, well, one, there isn't a lot of access to technology other than the girls that we entrust the technology to. So there's not really anyone looking for them, but also it's about creating a conversation. The safe spaces and the safe houses are not somewhere to hide away the girls. It's somewhere they can be protected and where there's security and we can start a conversation. So often the families themselves will come to the safe houses and start that dialogue to understand why their daughter ran away in the first place. Yes, so the safe space as well is an ongoing process. It's not just about the safe houses. It's also about reintegrating into the community and creating a safe space for the girls to go back to. I think one of the biggest challenges we've had is the mappers themselves. So if you're sending a young girl, empowering her with a phone and empowering her to map her village, they're kind of going against local cultures, and that can be a challenge as well. And I think one of the biggest factors in creating a safe space has been around kind of the community backup, the international community, and highlighting and supporting those girls that are trying to create safer spaces for everyone.
Thanks, Amelia. This is Jen. I appreciate your answering a few of those questions. Just to let everybody know, we're compiling those, and we will have a discussion session at the end. So please keep your questions coming for Amelia, Mustafa, and everybody else. If you have questions for all of our speakers in general, feel free to write that down. If they're for a specific person, we'll be sure to sort all of that out. And thank you again, Amelia, for that presentation. So next we have Hiyah Alabali from Mercy Corps. Take it away, Hiyah.
Hello? Hi, can you guys
Yes,
hear me?
we hear you clearly.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much. Happy International Youth Day to all of you guys. It was very inspiring to listen to Mustafa and to Amelia, and it's very interesting to be speaking after you, Amelia, in particular, because this idea of giving voice for girls and allowing them to speak for themselves overlaps a lot with what I'm going to be talking about tonight, or like today for some of you guys, but tonight from my side. So as Jen mentioned, my name is Hiyah Alabali. I work for Mercy Corps' Regional Girls Center. The Girls Center works directly with adolescent girls based in Amman, in Jordan, and aims to provide a safe platform to ensure that the girls are in the center of programming and are leading the process of producing knowledge. So why the center? And how does it create a safe space for adolescent girls? So first of all, taking a step back, how would girls define a safe space? Based on multiple consultations that we conducted with adolescent girls in Jordan and in the MENA region, adolescent girls' definitions of what makes a safe space or a safe city for them revolved around the idea of freedom and not being controlled, or a need for adults or males to feel safe. And this is very interesting because it reflects in a lot of ways the challenges that the girls do face in the region and in Jordan. Girls have expressed in multiple consultations that we conducted with them the multiple layers of control that they felt over their lives and that are affecting their sense of agency and silencing them. And there are, as I mentioned, there are multiple factors. So as you see from the quotes that we have here in the slides, from different reports that we conducted with the girls, one of the girls from Egypt in the first quote says that public spaces are occupied by boys and their presence is a threat. And this reflects how girls' voices are silenced by not having access to the physical spaces and not having a platform to express themselves and be heard. Moreover, girls' voices are restricted and controlled by social stressors and expectations. And this is also shows in the second quote that I have in the slide, which is by a girl.
Hi, Hiyah, are you still there? We've lost your audio. Hiyah, can you try to speak again or type and let us know you're still there? Just 1 second, I have been reconnecting, so she'll be continuing in just a second. Yes, we hear you
Hello?
again.
Sorry about that, I lost connection. But back to my point, if we dig deeper, adolescent girls are socialized to internalize that control. As one of the girls mentioned, that she doesn't feel free in anything, and she feels that her thoughts are being watched by her mother and brother. And there's always that self-fulfilling prophecy in which girls feel that they should be controlled. And this is also what we've seen through our programming, that sometimes the girls' imagination is limited. They can't imagine themselves as leaders and as in control of their own lives. And practitioners working with adolescent girls sometimes would fall into the same trap of control by imposing their preconceived ideas on what problems girls are facing and how solutions to these challenges faced by adolescent girls would look like. So how does this affect girls? This affects girls in multiple ways. At a personal level, adolescent girls feel a lack of agency and control over their lives. And at a societal level, girls feel might face different forms of violence. And at an institutional level, the services that girls receive from the practitioners working with them do not necessarily present them. So how does the center create a safe space for adolescent girls? So to tackle all these issues and building on Mercy Corps' regional presence as well as our global experience working with adolescent girls, Mercy Corps established the Regional Center for the Advancement of Adolescent Girls. And when you hear the word center, most people think that it's a physical place, but it is not a physical place, but rather it's a knowledge and innovative hub that aims to amplify adolescent girls' voices and put them in the center of the programming in order to increase their agency and better serve them. And if I can explain how the center works, it works in three different levels. One, it builds on the girls' capacity as leaders in their community and as knowledge producers, and also as a community of girls working together to develop their sense of solidarity. And on the other hand, it creates a safe space for adolescent girls by receiving services from their peers. And finally, it aims to transfer the knowledge that's produced by the girls themselves to practitioners to better serve the girls according to their own needs and on their own terms. So how does it look on ground? The center has piloted girl-led research in Jordan and is currently implementing a girl-led design pilot in Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan. So first, let me tell you a little bit about Girl Power. So Girl Power was actually funded through a YouthPower Learning grant, and it aimed to shift the current paradigm by being one of the first of its kind in Jordan and in the region to implement girl-led research. So unlike traditional empowerment programs, girl-led research emboldened girls by providing them with the opportunity to practice leadership within their community. It was implemented in 3 different areas in Jordan, and Girl Power researchers were able to conduct around 75 interviews with their peers to explore the topic of safe cities among adolescent girls in their areas. This project was completed in June 2018 and resulted in learnings that were shared with INGOs and NGOs which are working with adolescent girls. And as you see, like from Girl Power, the 3 components that the center works on are there. So the girls' capacity and skills were built through being trained as researchers and through leading these interviews that they conducted. And then girl interviewees also were able to be interviewed by peer adolescent girls, and by that feel in a safe space and an environment of and in a safe environment where they can express themselves to girls which are facing similar challenges and similar problems. And finally, all these findings that were found by the girls and collected by them from the interviews they conducted were shared by practitioners which are working with adolescent girls to better serve them based on what they found and what they expressed. The second project that we're currently working on is Wisdom and Information on Sexual Health Education by Girls, WISE Girls. It's also a girl-led initiative. It's funded and supported by IDEO.org. It puts girls at the center of the design process, tackling the issue of sexual and reproductive health in Zaatari camp in Jordan. Adolescent girls, which are slightly older, so 15 to 19 years old in Zaatari camp, will design a product which they will be using to peer educate younger adolescent girls, which are like 10 to 14 years old, on the topic of puberty and growing up and the changes that happen in their bodies. And this project is designed and implemented following the human-centered design method. And again, like as Girl Power, it tackles the three main components that the center are trying to work through, which is building capacity and skills of adolescent girls, and then creating that safe space for them to build that capacity and to produce that knowledge and to create and own the products that they come up with. And then also a safe space for adolescent girls that are being taught, in that case in WISE Girls, in which younger adolescents are being taught by older adolescents that are close to them in age and that are going through similar challenges. And finally, the product that the girls will come up with will be shared with NGOs and INGOs to be replicated. So what are the key factors to make a safe space successful? So from our experience with adolescent girls, what makes a safe space successful is when adolescent girls lead and produce and own the process of that space that's being created. Like in the case of the center, it might not be a physical space, but it's more of like a mental space and a space of imagination for a new reality that the girls haven't imagined before. A space of resistance as well of the dominant definition of what research is and who designers are and what products should look like. So girls by that have ownership. So for them to have a safe space, they should have ownership and agency over the activities and the discussions that take place within that space. And also they should interact with fellow, in that case, adolescent girls, to feel the sense of solidarity in the community they live in. So to wrap up, here in the slide you can find some of the quotes from adolescent girls that we worked with in Girl Power, and from the first quote is from a girl commenting on the idea of the center. So for them, they see it as a chance to feel free to express themselves and know their rights. And for the girl researchers, the girls expressed how they learned to believe in themselves, and they felt that they felt the sense of solidarity where they felt that they're not alone in their challenges and the problems they're facing. So the center, to wrap up, the center tackles the issue of of lack of a space for adolescent girls in MENA, starting from Jordan, through providing a safe platform that puts girls in the lead of programming and knowledge production around their issues and around the challenges they're facing, where they should be in the first place. And I'm ending up with one of my favorite quotes by Mona Tahawi, an Egyptian feminist, who writes in her book Headscarves and Hymens that the most subversive thing a woman can do is talk about her life as if it really matters. And this is really what the center tries to do, to create that safe space for the girls and that space to imagine a different reality, is providing the platform for girls to speak about their lives and be listened to as if it really matters, because it does really matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hiyah. That was great. And so next we have Gustavo and Maria from Asegurando la Educación. My Spanish is clearly very rusty.
It was perfect.
Take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, and happy International Youth Day. I'm thrilled to join Marja Anariba, who is the Vice President of the Student Government in one of the schools where we work, where Project Asegurando la Educación works. And she also is the President of the Comité de Convivencia Escolar, which I still haven't found the translation for the word convivencia, but more or less is that school committee that aims to promote and improve relationships and sort of social cohesion and healthy relationships among school students and teachers and parents. Marta? So let me move this slide quickly. I'm originally from Ciudad Juárez, Mexico, so the topic of safe spaces, I went through that as a young person. I can relate how important it is to have those as a youth, even though I'm not one of them anymore. But that's something that we're trying to do in Asegurando la Educación. And the presentation we will hear from Marja, and from the project side, I will share some of the data that we're looking at and how we're using some of that data trying to create change in some of the schools. So just briefly, for a few seconds, the Asegurando la Educación project is a systems-based, uses a systems-based approach where we work with the central government of Honduras and particularly the Ministry of Education in promoting safe learning environments and promoting a reduction of levels of violence and an improvement of education outcomes in schools, but we also work at a policy level, which is a great way to promote sustainability. I'm not going to go over this slide too much, but for us, working with the school community is a critical piece of the project. So we work directly with students, teachers, other personnel, other education personnel, and parents. Before I jump to the next slide, I'm actually going to ask Marja to share her views on school safety and what constitutes and what are some of the challenges to have safe spaces for youth in schools. So complementing what my colleagues have said, we're talking about the school setting here. And then she will also share a story that just happened a couple of weeks ago about what they're doing to promote safer spaces in her school. Marja is going to talk in Spanish, and I'll do my best to translate. I know some of you speak Spanish, so don't criticize my translation. I'm really bad at translating, but you can help me. So, Marja, please go ahead, por favor. Comparte tu historia.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Marja Anariba y yo les vengo a hablar un poco sobre lo que es una escuela segura, un espacio seguro. En mi opinión hay muchos problemas, hay muchos aspectos que están afectando mi centro educativo. Pues hace poco nos hemos presentado hacia el centro educativo como el comité de convivencia. Yo soy la presidenta de acá. Yo opino que este comité o Asegurando la Educación está realizando bastantes cambios, está causando cosas buenas, o sea, está inspirando confianza de los alumnos hacia nosotros. Hace un par de días se presentó una ocasión en la que a un chico se le ha perdido su cartera, entonces ya ellos abocaron hacia mí, hacia el comité de convivencia, a pedir ayuda. Pues tratamos de hacer todo lo posible por solucionarlo hasta que solucionamos el inconveniente.
So I'm sorry, so I translate briefly, and I'm going to do a very quick summary. And Marja introduced herself. She's, as I said, the vice president of student government, and in that capacity, she's the president of the Comité de Convivencia in the school, which is an entity that didn't exist before, and that's part of the outcomes of the project. There was an incident recently where a student lost or lost his wallet, or it was stolen, and now with having this figure of the Comité de Convivencia, that's sort of an authority figure that they, or this student in particular, felt that he could trust to go and talk to. Por favor. Sí, continúa con la historia de la cartera.
Pues solucionamos ese problema con ayuda de todo el comité de convivencia. Días después se me acerca una chica del mismo grado, de la misma sección, a que nosotros brindamos nuestra ayuda, y me dice que ella necesita platicar conmigo, que ella necesita desahogarse con alguien, y que ella siente, o que nosotros nos creamos confianza, que ella siente que somos personas que tenemos cierto nivel de... Les inspiramos confianza, y entonces ella me platica sobre problemas que tiene en su familia, problemas familiares, y pide consejos. Me explica de que gracias a eso ella se está alejando un poco de sus estudios y que siente que le está afectando bastante. Después de que ella me platique eso, yo le ayudo, yo le comento sobre qué está bueno hacer y qué sería lo mejor para ella. Entonces ella me agradece, y al paso de los días otra chica se acerca y me platica de que su amiga le comentó sobre lo que yo había hecho con ella, y también se repitió la historia.
Okay. So Marja was sharing the story that after they were able to find that wallet, which was actually stolen, other people, other students have looked at them as a source of inspiration, because they trust the comité, which is led by both students, teachers, and parents, and now they feel that they have there's somebody in the school that cares about some of their issues. She talked about this particular experience of a young woman who had some challenges, which in the end for us it's about making the school a safe space for young people, even if some of the challenges they face are from home. In the end, school should be a safe haven. So thank you, Marja, for sharing that story. I know I have about 5 minutes or so I'm going to go quickly through the slides. And again, I just want to share briefly, we conducted a study about perceptions of security or safety in our schools, and I want to highlight the importance of looking at data in our case. So we asked, among many other questions, students how safe do they feel in different locations or different areas of the school. The aggregated level of data shows that students feel, on a scale up to 100, if we see that as a thermometer, they feel at 86% safe. Men or male students feel 88% safe, and female students feel 84%. This is extremely high versus what we were expecting, because we're working in the schools that are most affected by violence and crime, many of which are affected by gang violence and many other forms of crime. So what we noticed there was a very high level, perception of security in the school. So for us, some of our hypotheses are that there's a normalization of violence. So even though they may not perceive an issue as a threat, it's still, it's normalized. They know how to navigate, and the other thing is that schools may be safer than other places where young people are, or where they sort of live, such as homes, their own home, or the community. Now, what's interesting is when you start unpacking some of the data, and we find that out of all the 11 places where we asked them, bathrooms is the place where they feel most unsafe. So we see the drop from 88 for males to 74 in terms of how safe they feel, and from 84 to 60% in the case of females, which is an important fact, because that's the place in the school where they feel most unsafe. Now, and I have a couple of only slides. I have 2 minutes. I'm sorry I couldn't translate the slide. There's a lot of data, but I want to highlight what's there in orange at the very bottom. That's the bathroom. So we see on the left the list of locations or areas in the school. So we have, the classroom with their teachers, in the entrance, recess, cafeteria, on their way to the school, so in the community, in the hallways, in the courtyard, with friends and classmates, at the exit, or in the bathrooms. And I wanted to highlight. Now, these different columns are different schools. So I wanted to highlight how important it is to start segregating the data for us, because there's some schools where bathrooms is really a challenge. So we see school A, 50% for males. So the trend is even worse for males. So something must be happening in that school for boys in the bathrooms that are making them particularly unsafe, that are making them feel particularly unsafe. Whereas you have school D, where they have an 81%, which is, or 83% in school B, which is probably not as bad. Now, if we start unpacking even more, we have to talk about, and my point here is that there's no one size fits all approach. It's not like, okay, we have to make schools safe. Yeah, but where do you start? Where are those spots in the school where students feel unsafe or young people feel unsafe? And who are these people? Who are the students who feel most unsafe? So when we look at or segregate data by students with moderate disabilities, their degree of safety or unsafety in the bathrooms gets exacerbated, which is probably not a surprise. But we see that female students with a moderate disability feel 38% safe in the bathroom. We have to ask the questions as to why and look at, what are some of the issues in specific cases. Just because I have a little time, so my point with showing this very brief overview of data is that it's not, when we talk about school safety and safe spaces in school settings, we have to start understanding where, who is experiencing unsafety. Are we talking about boys, males? And that schools vary. It's not that, I often hear, well, Honduras, gang issues. Yes, that's one. But there's issues happening in the schools, within the schools, that are making students feel very unsafe in certain areas, not everywhere. We see that students feel very safe with teachers and in the classroom. And because of that, we're investing heavily on I have, time's up. I have to translate, so I'm going to use the translation time as an excuse for 20 more seconds. Knowledge sharing, I'm going to talk only about that top part, because what we're doing right now with schools is sharing the information from this study to help them understand what are the issues. So the comités de convivencia can take action based on that. Just one example, last week, we shared the results of thank you, Jen. We shared the results of the data of a particular school with their authorities, and we had teachers and parents and students. Now, when you ask, a lot of people say, yeah, bathrooms is the place where they feel most unsafe. But that doesn't mean that that's taken to action. So if you start making these issues visible, and you start, putting on the board there in the school, questions like, do you know that bathrooms is the place where students feel unsafe? You know, then you start making this a real issue and taking action. And maybe to the perpetrators of bullying or whatever the issues may be, then they start noticing that somebody's putting an eye on that part of the school, that they know that there's some issues there. And so that's an important piece. There's much more about the knowledge sharing with our participants, with our schools that I'd like to share, but I'm going to stop there because we have no time. But working with all key actors in the school is part of the critical aspect of our work. So thank you. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Gustavo. And Marha, that was fantastic. So we have a lot of questions coming in, and I'm going to try to start with some of the questions that go to all of our presenters and let you all kind of jump in and warm up. Any questions?
Jen, we are getting a lot of feedback from you. I think you may have... Okay, I think it's better now. Go ahead.
Is it okay now? Okay. Just wanted to say I'm going to start with the questions that are general for all the speakers, and then I'll try to jump into some more specific ones. If you have questions, please keep them coming. If we don't get to them in the next 20 minutes, we can still reach out to the speakers afterwards. So I'm going to flip over to my list of questions and start right at the top. So I saw a few questions around the same theme of how do we extend safe youth spaces into the wider community. So some people talked about informal settlements, and some people talked about actually, and this is related to Amelia, who had to unfortunately drop off, but where mothers and grandmothers in the home might be the ones promoting the female genital cutting. So how do we basically create safe spaces in the wider community? And this goes back to an earlier point. I serve in the YMCA Center Branch Committee. The youth must go back into the community, into their homes and schools. So do any of the speakers have thoughts on that?
Jen, this is Mike McCabe. I think part of that is how do we build a philosophy or of kind of a continuum of safe spaces that every young person should grow up with the confidence and security to know that there's this continuum of safe spaces that we're putting into place in a community, you know, and in that systems approach that we take, what it requires for the home to be a safe space. So how we address issues of gender-based and intrafamiliar violence, that as they go to school, you know, is there the adequate kind of pathway to get there and lighting if it needs to, if it's in darker hours, you know, and then once in the schools, as Gustavo pointed out, you know, how do we analyze where those unsafe spaces are? It's not only, you know, in the bathrooms, there's also a number of countries where we're dealing with issues where, you know, unfortunately, young women in particular may be, you know, dealing with issues of being solicited for sex for grades in a number of countries we're dealing with. So how do we set up systems that protect young people in the school and then in the broader community? And that, you know, that looks to issues that we've been learning a lot from the youth violence prevention area, especially with, you know, urban design or community design that allows for kind of that protection of whether it's of youth of a particular age or gender or sex or those with disabilities, because that's also a big area where young people with disabilities are often overlooked in kind of community design processes. So it's how do we think about a safe space continuum that the whole community can buy into, because they know that's what will help young people thrive based on kind of age-appropriate programming.
Thanks, Mike, for jumping in on that. I appreciate that. So let's ask Mustafa the same question. I think that one came up during your presentation, Mustafa. So what are your thoughts?
Mustafa, you may need to turn on your microphone. Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. So, hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. So I would say that how can we create a safe space? So I would tackle this question down, addressing different audience in the community and the broader the broader participants we are dealing with. I would start with the student, and the children and the young leader who are our main participant in Mish Madrasa. And I would say that we start with just having conversations about themselves and about ourselves, sharing stories and sharing problems and trying to figure out solutions with it. And then they feel safe once they feel safe sharing without any judgment, without any threatening, and they feel emotionally and mentally safe enough so that they share their own stories and their own experience and problems. This is when they have this trust to share, and this is when they have this trust that this place is safe and they will share whatever in my mind. So that's in terms of the children, and this in our experience would take from like 3 to 6 months in the very beginning, working with the children in a regular basis. And the other audience that I would like to speak about are their parents, and the parents like with ideas, such ideas or such communities and environment that we are at. Safe spaces are such a rare thing and very new concepts and values being applied in Mish Madrasa as a safe place space. And this is when they have all these questions about what actually are we doing, and because they are for them all these ideas are strange, and this is when when we start just focusing with the students, and when they see the results on the children, they get convinced on the value system that we're having or whatever system we have to create the safe place. And the third audience I would address is the people who challenge the idea, the other stakeholders in the community that feel that such a safe space can be threatening, such as the school principals, whether public or religious schools in the neighborhood, would feel that, oh, this idea is against our core values or against our ideology in general. And what we use facing this or addressing this problem is their technique. So, for example, they would call us that we have strange ideas. So, because they are religious people and religious imams and they are respected. So what we do is that we bring thoughts and ideas from the heritage, from our heritage, from 800 years ago and 1,000 years ago, from Arabian and Muslim philosophers and thinkers who have the same ideas and face them with this technique. So I would say that that's our experience creating Mish Madrasa as a safe space in Cairo. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. I love all that detail. I really appreciate all that.
Thank you.
We have a question for everybody, and I think, unfortunately, Amelia has fallen off, so we're going to start with Hiyah, and then Gustavo, and then go back to Mustafa. The question is, how do you design these safe spaces for sustainability and for resource mobilization? So Hiyah, are you able to take that question on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So as I mentioned, like with the 3 different components that the center is working with, I think the part for sustainability is tackled at this moment, at this stage of the center's work through the through sharing and circulating learnings and products that were produced by adolescent girls with NGOs to replicate and to use for either designing new programs or to actually, for example, with white girls, use the actual product with other adolescent girls. So sustainability is, at this stage of the center, is very clear when it comes to the knowledge production that takes place and the knowledge that is actually being produced, whether it's from the research or from the designed product itself. But for the other components, we're still working through it. We're hoping to keep working with the girl researchers, which we're already trying to do right now in engaging the girl researchers that are trained in different parts in Jordan with other Mercy Corps programs to feed in the programs and to practice their skills and build on them.
Thanks, Hiyah. That's great, and thanks for the brief answer. We want to get to as many questions as we can. So, Gustavo, do you have an answer to the same question about sustainability and resource mobilization?
Sure. Well, again, thanks for the question, and I'll speak on from the school setting, which is where we're working right now. And I think for us is about creating a culture of knowledge and an opportunity in creating space for reflection among the key stakeholders. As I've heard, this quote of the more reflective we are, the more effective we are. And what we have found is that people know some of these things anecdotally, but then you bring and create a space where this is shared, and you have data to back it up. And sometimes you find surprising data that you want to share. And then you create a space where key actors, the parents and the teachers and the Comité de Convivencia and the students talk about these things, and that sort of starts creating a little more accountability, and it leads to action. So right now, I see the project as a facilitator, because really the bulk of what needs to be done can be done by the school actors. So sometimes it's just the information, sometimes it's minor cosmetic repairs of bathrooms and things like that, and sometimes it's just awareness. Now sometimes it's more complicated than that, or more expensive. Part of what we're trying to do with the Comités de Convivencia and other larger education bodies like that involve the municipality, etc., is to strengthen their capacity to do community and resource mobilization. But what I have found so far is that in a large number of cases, I'm not going to say the majority, but in a large number of cases, it's not really about a lot of resources, but it's about the information, and then creating a space, facilitating a space where actors take action and they hold each other accountable. A lot of investment in professional development for teachers and directors to know how to respond, react, or refer cases of violence. That will be sort of a second step. And we see schools that are located in some of the most violent communities in Honduras, but the school is a safe haven. And that's because the director plays an important role and his or her leadership is critical to ensure a safe space. And then we see the opposite, schools with high levels of unsafety or perceptions of insecurity in communities that are not really that violent, comparatively speaking. So the role of teachers and directors is critical. I'm going to stop there.
Thanks, Gustavo. That was great. We do have a couple of closing slides about kind of next steps in International Youth Day and YouthPower Learning. So I'm going to throw it to Mustafa for a brief answer, and then if we have time, I'll try to get to one more question. And again, the questions we don't get to, we'll try to follow up after. And Mustafa, thoughts on sustainability?
Yes, so actually we have been thinking, the team of Mishmadak have been thinking about sustainability especially that it is a community-based approach, so we are discussing ideas and hearing the young leader ideas and the children's ideas. It's so interesting that they have many ideas that we can actually apply, and this can generate revenue, and from this revenue we can run things bigger and scale up and duplicate our model. So now we are thinking of very rough ideas about instead of just chasing donor funds, we actually start implementing all these ideas to generate revenue for us to replicate the mission data model or whatever model the young leaders come up with, and we work through. So we were thinking about partnerships with donors to create a youth trust fund, or creating interactive graphic design services, or something very rough now, but the idea is there, seeing all the potential from the children's and from the young leaders' ideas about the community and about the opportunities we can get out of it. So yeah.
That's great. Those are some really specific examples. I appreciate that. So I want to end with, just trying to keep it to maybe 30 seconds for each of you. Hiyah, Gustavo, and then Mustafa again. On a question about any tips on psychosocial support for the staff. That seems like a kind of general question that maybe all of you would have a different approach on. So let's try to end with that one. Hiyah, you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. I'll be brief. But it's a very interesting question, especially, you never realize how tough as a woman it is to work with adolescent girls till you're actually working with them, because the amount of triggers and the amount of memories and things that come throughout the discussions with adolescent girls is very interesting. We don't have a big number of staff. We usually work with local mentors in the community, and it's still a learning experience of how we do the psychosocial support for the staff. But what we do right now is mostly usual check-ins, usual debriefs with the mentors to make sure that we're on the same page, that they're getting the support that is needed for them whenever they feel triggered, or they feel that the topics that they're hearing from adolescent girls is reminding them of certain memories, for example, and always grounding it back and putting it in the bigger picture of the power dynamics that females are situated and positioned in the society we're in.
Thank you. That's great. Gustavo, any thoughts from you? I think you're kind of answering the opposite question in the discussion box, so thanks for your ongoing discussion there.
Great discussion there.
Sure. Thank you, Elva, for your question. I was trying to answer on typing, and there's a thought halfway through. But to answer the question about psychosocial support and well-being of those who are in the front lines, we recognize that actually teachers, in our case, there's high levels of trauma, sudden loss, grief that are really going unattended, and this is across the board. In the specific case of some communities in Honduras that have been affected by violence, migration, all kinds of issues. So, but in the case of teachers who we see as our allies to promote safe spaces, we have this program called Docentes por la Paz, which is based on using the framework from the Interagency Network for Education Emergencies on teachers in crisis context. And basically the first module is helping teachers understand their role, because they tend to, with good intentions, that they try to, or they feel that they have to play psychologist, financial advisor, family advisor, all kinds of things because of the lack of other resources in the school. So teachers carry a huge burden, and there's really no or very little support to them. So helping them understand and delineate their role, and helping them, this is what I was telling Elva, develop guidelines and protocols to respond and refer cases of violence. So this is actually at a policy level, involving the police and Fiscalía de la Niñez and other agencies. That's important, so they know who to talk to or who to call or who to refer certain cases. And that relieves a big burden for them. But there's also intentional and specific interventions on teacher well-being that we're promoting, and that involves a lot of peer-to-peer support.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We are just about out of time. Safa, do you have any quick thoughts on that? And then I'm going to actually ask Mike McCabe to give a closing thought.
Yeah, sure. For the sake of the time, yeah, from our experience. Sorry, I can hear echo and okay. So it's better now. So it's a very important question and something that we have experienced with. So our staff, their psychosocial support is very critical. And something that really worked with us, the answer was relationships. The relationships with the children and with the students and the young leaders, and just sharing all these ideas and feeling that they are not their teachers, they are their friends, and accordingly they have this relationship with the broader community, with their parents, with the different stakeholders and leaders around the community, and this given this fact, it's very rewarding, and the staff would feel that they are really rewarded from the amount of the emotional support and the mental support, meaning that all these ideas they get and solutions they get from all these different stakeholders, and that I do believe that was very rewarding and great for the staff. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mustafa. I appreciate everybody's contributions. And Mike?
Yeah, no, thank you. Actually, I had a comment related to that last question on psychosocial support, because that's such a key part as we think about safe spaces. And when we look at the World Health Organization findings on just kind of the skyrocketing numbers of aspects of adolescent mental health and the challenge that young people are facing, and its impact on not only adolescent health outcomes, but education, employment, and civic outcomes, it's really important that we're thinking about how we build in psychosocial or trauma-informed approaches when we design a safe space program. So like at the family level, our Proponte Más project in Honduras is doing a lot around very intentional family communication and family strengthening counseling. It's a very intentional, intensive model with young people who are in what we call secondary level violence prevention. And that's been tremendously successful in helping reduce recidivism rates by young people by really focusing on whoever that family may be and dealing with some of the issues of anxiety and trauma and mental health that they're struggling with through what we call cognitive behavioral therapy and family counseling. At the school level in El Salvador, both some of the organizations we work with in the schools, as well as a group called Glasswing, has been doing some really interesting things to create a safe psychological healing space in the school using techniques like mindfulness in the first 5 to 10 minutes of the day. Because as youth come from their home where there may be violence or passing the gangs along the way to school, they get to school not ready to really focus and learn because they've been going through so many traumatic, potentially traumatic environments. So that use of mindfulness has really been a key to helping them reduce what we call the toxic stress that leads them away from being able to focus. And then at the community level, the Commonwealth Secretariat, the Commonwealth Youth Program as it was formerly known, has recently rolled out what's called Youth Worker Certification. And actually USAID is looking at doing something somewhat similar in the psychosocial support arena, but it's an open source curriculum on youth worker certification that can be applied in any country by an educational institution to really build the capacity of those who work with young people. And it has components that focus on psychosocial support or trauma-informed approaches as as those who work with young people are getting professional development on a whole array of topics to improve the quality of youth programming, including around safe spaces and psychosocial support. So those are just kind of 3 different ways that that can be addressed along that continuum of safe spaces.
Thanks, Mike. Those were some great additions. I will say that the Youth in Peace and Security community of practice, of which I'm a co-champion, has a really special interest in this idea of trauma healing and psychosocial support. So if any of you have program examples or more specific examples, please feel free to reach out to us. We are actually looking to put together, hopefully, a webinar or some kind of document on best practices on that topic. In terms of what you can do next more generally, well, first of all, you can contribute to the Twitter stream IYD 2018, well, hashtag IYD 2018, you see it there, at YouthPower Learning, and spread the message of hashtag positive youth development. You can join one of our communities of practice, like the Youth in Peace and Security one. There's also a gender community of practice, cross-sectoral skills, and youth engagement. You can always come to our Learning Hub to look at our resources. We've got an evolving, growing, and I think really good resource list under a bunch of sectoral specialties there. And then continue to send your reports to us, both through the communities of practice, and you can always write us at info@youthpower.org. Just to let you know, we do have 10 active grants right now. Some of them are in the cross-sectoral and PYD area, some are in gender, and some are in civic engagement and peace building. So those are through our communities of practice, and we're you look for presentations from our grant winners there. We also have, pretty soon we'll be awarding the Young Women Transform Prize. So that's exciting news from us. And thanks for sticking around. I know we're ending a couple minutes late. This will all be recorded. It will be shared with everybody. I appreciate your patience through the audio challenges and the questions that we weren't able to get to. We'll try to share some answers for you when we send out the recording. And in the meantime, please check out www.youthpower.org for more resources, and especially that link right at the bottom there for Safe Spaces itself. So thanks very much to everybody. Maria, do you have any final closing comments from over in DC?
Thank you so much, and look for the recording of the webinar, and we will provide some additional answers to questions that we haven't been able to cover on the webinar. So thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks very much. Take care.